Everything in my life begins in my mind, whether I notice it or not. Before any action happens, before any habit takes root, before any success or failure appears in my real world, there is always a thought first. That thought may seem small, quiet, or easy to overlook, but it carries great power. It sets direction. It influences whether I move ahead or remain stuck where I am. When I truly understand this, I see that my mind is not just one part of my life. It is the central control point of my entire life. Many people wait for their surroundings to change before they decide to change themselves. They wait for motivation, confidence, or the perfect opportunity to show up from the outside. But the truth is that nothing external can permanently improve my life if my thinking stays the same. If my mind is filled with fear, doubt, and excuses, I will find ways to ruin even the best chances placed in front of me. But when my mind becomes focused, disciplined, and purposeful, I begin creating opportunities instead of sitting around waiting for them. Every habit I carry today began as a single thought repeated again and again over time. Laziness did not appear suddenly. Confidence did not arrive overnight either. Both were built in the same place, the mind. When I allow negative thoughts to repeat freely without questioning them, they slowly turn into beliefs. Those beliefs influence my actions, and my actions shape my outcomes. This is how a life is formed, not through one dramatic event, but through the quiet thoughts I allow myself to entertain every single day. The mind can become my strongest tool or my most dangerous enemy. If I allow it to run unchecked, it will pull me toward comfort, fear, and short-term pleasure. It will remind me of past failures and try to convince me that those moments define my future. But when I take control of my thinking, I break that cycle. I start questioning my thoughts instead of automatically obeying them. I ask myself whether a thought is helping me grow or holding me back. That simple pause creates power and clarity. Once I accept that my mind is the starting point of everything, I also accept responsibility for my life. I can no longer blame other people, situations, or bad luck for where I am. This responsibility is not a weight, it is freedom. Because if my thinking helped create my current situation, then changing my thinking can help create a different one. This means change is always possible, no matter how far behind I may feel. Controlling my mind does not mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is fine. It means choosing my responses instead of reacting emotionally. It means training myself to look for lessons instead of excuses. It means reminding myself that discomfort often signals growth, not failure. When my mind understands this, challenges stop feeling like threats and start feeling like tests I am capable of passing. Success, confidence, discipline, and resilience all begin as decisions made in the mind before they ever show up in my behavior. I do not wake up one day and suddenly become strong. I first think strong thoughts. I do not suddenly become consistent. I first decide mentally that quitting is no longer an option. That decision may not transform everything instantly, but it changes my direction, and direction determines everything. When I control my mind, I take control of my future. I stop living on autopilot and start living with purpose. My life begins to move in the direction my thoughts lead it. This is why mastering my mind is not optional. It is the foundation of every meaningful change I want to experience. Thoughts move through my mind constantly, often without warning or permission. Some are helpful, some are negative, and many are simply reactions based on past experiences. The mistake I used to make was believing that every thought I had was true and deserved my attention. Over time, I learned that this belief quietly steals control of my life. A thought is not an order. It is only a suggestion, and I decide whether to accept it or let it pass. Just because a thought enters my mind does not mean it defines who I am. Fearful thoughts do not mean I am weak. Doubting thoughts do not mean I am incapable. They are patterns built from past events, opinions, and failures. When I understand this, I create space between myself and my thoughts. That space is where freedom begins. In that space, I gain the ability to choose instead of react. Many people live trapped inside their own minds, constantly replaying mistakes and imagining worst-case scenarios. They allow one negative thought to grow into a full story that controls their emotions, confidence, and decisions. But when I step back and observe my thoughts instead of identifying with them, their grip weakens. I remind myself that I am the thinker, not the thought itself. Choosing my thoughts requires awareness. I must first notice what I am telling myself, especially during difficult moments. When things go wrong, my mind often jumps to blame, harsh self-criticism, or fear about the future. If I do not catch those thoughts early, they influence my behavior without my consent. Awareness is the first step to discipline. Without awareness, there is no choice. Once I become aware, I can challenge my thoughts. I ask simple but powerful questions. Is this thought based on facts or emotions? Is it helping me move forward or holding me back? Would I speak this way to someone I care about? Many negative thoughts lose their power when questioned. They fall apart when I refuse to treat them as truth. Controlling my thoughts does not mean forcing constant positivity or pretending that struggle does not exist. It means choosing constructive thinking instead of destructive thinking. It means replacing thoughts of failure with thoughts of learning. It means shifting from I cannot to I will try, and from this is impossible to this is difficult, but I can improve. These small shifts, repeated every day, slowly reshape my mindset. The voice inside my head speaks more often and more loudly than anyone else in my life. If that voice is harsh, critical, and discouraging, it slowly drains my confidence and motivation. When I change that inner voice, I change how I show up in the world. Encouraging self-talk builds courage. Calm self-talk creates clarity. Honest self-talk builds strength. Choosing my thoughts is a daily practice, not a one-time decision. Some days my mind feels calm and focused. Other days it resists with old habits and patterns. On those days, discipline matters more than motivation. I do not need to feel confident to think confidently. I need to act with intention even when my emotions resist. When I stop believing every thought that appears, I stop being controlled by fear, doubt, and past mistakes. I begin responding to life instead of reacting to it. I become more grounded, focused, and deliberate in my actions. This is the power of realizing that I am not my thoughts. I am the one who chooses them, and that choice shapes my life. My attention is one of the most powerful tools I possess. Yet for a long time I treated it carelessly. I allowed my focus to drift toward problems, fears, and distractions without understanding the cost. Whatever I consistently focus on grows larger in my mind, stronger in my emotions, and more influential in my actions. This is not random. Focus gives energy, and energy creates growth. When my attention stays fixed on problems, those problems begin to feel heavier than they truly are. I replay them repeatedly, examine them from every angle, and imagine negative outcomes. The situation itself may not change, but my stress increases, my confidence weakens, and my ability to act decreases. When I shift my focus toward solutions, learning, and progress, my mindset changes. I feel more capable because I am training my mind to move forward instead of staying stuck. Focus shapes perception. Two people can face the same challenge and experience it completely differently based on where their attention goes. One focuses on the risk and feels frozen. The other focuses on the opportunity to grow and takes action. The difference is not intelligence or luck, it is focus. Where attention goes, interpretation follows, and interpretation determines response. In daily life, my focus is constantly being pulled in different directions. Social media, comparisons, opinions, and noise compete for my mental energy. If I do not protect my attention, it gets scattered, and a scattered mind cannot build a strong life. Learning to control my focus means learning to choose what deserves my mental energy. Not everything needs my reaction. Not every opinion needs my agreement. Not every problem needs to live rent-free in my mind. When I decide where my attention goes, I decide what grows in my life. Over time, this practice builds mental strength, emotional balance, and clarity. My mind becomes less reactive and more intentional. And with that control, I gain the ability to shape my life from the inside out. Energy, if I do not choose my focus on purpose, something else will choose it for me. That is why living without focus often leads to stress and frustration. The mind becomes crowded, distracted, and reactive to everything around it. True clarity comes when focus becomes intentional and selective. When I choose improvement instead of chasing perfection, everything begins to shift. When I fixate on being perfect, my attention stays locked on the fear of failing. That fear slows my movement and creates doubt and hesitation. But when I focus on becoming a little better each day, progress feels realistic and possible. Momentum starts to grow naturally. Small victories build confidence, and confidence strengthens consistency. Over time, this steady pattern creates real change. Focus also shapes emotional strength and stability. When I focus on things I cannot control, I feel weak and powerless. My energy drains and frustration grows. But when I shift my focus to what I can control, my actions begin to feel meaningful again. I cannot control other people's opinions, the past, or unexpected problems. I can control my effort, my mindset, my attitude, and how I prepare. When I direct my attention there, I build resilience instead of resentment. My emotional balance improves, and I respond instead of reacting. Gratitude is another clear example of how focus shapes experience. When my attention stays only on what is missing, life feels empty no matter how much I accomplish. Even success feels incomplete. But when I intentionally focus on progress, lessons learned, and what is already working, my mindset changes. This does not mean I stop wanting more or aiming higher. It simply means I stop letting dissatisfaction control my thoughts. I can be grateful and still grow. Both can exist at the same time. My thinking focus also shapes my identity. If I constantly replay past mistakes in my mind, I slowly begin to see myself as a failure. That image becomes familiar and heavy. But when I focus on the lessons I gained from those mistakes, I start to see myself as someone who learns and improves. Identity is not fixed or permanent. It is reinforced by repeated focus. What I give attention to today becomes part of who I believe I am tomorrow. Over time, that belief turns into behavior. Training focus takes practice and patience. The mind naturally drifts toward comfort, worry, and negativity. Redirecting focus is not about forcing thoughts away, but about gently choosing where to place attention again and again. Each time I notice my mind moving toward unhelpful thoughts, I calmly guide it back to what supports growth. With repetition, this becomes natural. What begins as effort slowly turns into habit, and that habit shapes my mindset. When I control my focus, I guide my growth. I stop feeding fear and begin feeding progress. The world around me may not change right away, but my ability to handle it improves. Challenges still appear, but they feel less overwhelming. What I focus on grows. And when I choose wisely, my life grows along with it. Many limits I once believed were fixed were actually created by my own thinking. They felt real because I repeated them to myself for years without questioning them. I told myself what I could not do, what I was bad at, and what kind of future was realistic for someone like me. Over time, these thoughts became invisible walls. I stopped reaching beyond them, not because I lacked ability, but because I believed the limits were real. My mindset acts like a lens through which I see the world. If that lens is narrow, everything appears restricted. Problems look larger than they are. Risks seem dangerous, and effort feels pointless. When my mindset expands, those same challenges appear manageable. Risks feel calculated, and effort feels worthwhile. Nothing outside changes immediately, but my interpretation changes, and interpretation drives action. Many limits are inherited rather than proven. They come from childhood experiences, comparisons, past disappointments, or other people's opinions. One failure can convince the mind that it represents permanent inability. One negative comment can turn into an inner voice that repeats for years. When I accept these messages without questioning them, I allow someone else's view to define my potential. A fixed mindset avoids difficulty because it sees struggle as evidence of weakness. A growth-focused mindset understands that struggle is part of learning. When I change how I view effort, fear begins to lose power. I stop seeing discomfort as a sign to quit and start seeing it as proof that I am stretching beyond old limits. That single shift unlocks new levels of performance and confidence. Belief shapes persistence. When I believe I can improve, I stay engaged longer. I practice more, learn from errors, and recover faster from setbacks. When I believe my abilities are limited, I give up early and call it realism. The outcome may look like a lack of talent, but the true cause is a lack of belief. My mindset also shapes how I respond to failure. Failure can either strengthen limits or redefine them. When I see failure as proof that I am not enough, I shrink my goals. When I see it as feedback, I adjust my approach. The event does not change, only my interpretation does. Yet the result becomes completely different. Fear thrives inside a limited mindset. It exaggerates consequences and minimizes ability. It convinces me that rejection will destroy me, embarrassment is unbearable, and trying is more dangerous than staying still. When I challenge these thoughts, fear weakens. I realize that most of the outcomes I imagine never actually happen. And even when they do, I am capable of handling them. Expanding my mindset requires deliberate effort. I must regularly question the stories I tell myself. I replace "I can't" with "I can learn." I replace "this is too hard" with "this will take time." These are not empty words. They are commitments to remain in the process instead of escaping it. Growth never comes from comfort. When I avoid situations that test me, my world becomes smaller. When I step into challenges believing I can adapt, my world expands. Confidence grows not from winning every time, but from knowing I can recover, adjust, and keep moving forward. When my mindset changes, my limits shift with it. What once felt impossible becomes difficult. What felt difficult becomes manageable. What felt manageable becomes routine. This is how progress truly happens. My mindset does not just influence my life, it defines the boundaries of what my life can become. The way I speak to myself quietly shapes every area of my experience. Long before anyone else offers an opinion, my inner voice has already judged my abilities, my effort, and my chances. That voice is always present, commenting on every mistake and every challenge. When that voice is harsh and negative, it drains energy and weakens confidence. When it is honest and supportive, it becomes a source of strength. Self-talk is powerful because it feels personal. I rarely question it. If someone else says I am not good enough, I may argue. When I tell myself the same thing, I often accept it as truth. Over time, these repeated messages become beliefs, and beliefs guide behavior. This is how self-talk quietly builds the future, one sentence at a time. Negative self-talk often sounds reasonable. It disguises itself as honesty or protection. It says it is keeping me safe from disappointment. In reality, it keeps me limited. It highlights past failures while ignoring growth. It magnifies weaknesses and minimizes strengths. When I allow this voice to dominate, I hesitate more, take fewer chances, and settle for less than I am capable of achieving. Changing self-talk does not mean lying to myself or pretending everything is perfect. It means speaking with fairness and intention. Instead of attacking myself for mistakes, I focus on learning. Instead of saying I always fail, I recognize effort and progress. This change creates emotional balance. It keeps me responsible without destroying confidence. The words I repeat internally shape how I handle pressure. In hard moments, my inner dialogue decides whether I panic or remain steady. If my self-talk says I cannot handle this, stress takes over. If it says I have faced worse and survived, calm follows. The situation may be intense, but my response becomes controlled. Self-talk also shapes discipline. When I wake up tired or unmotivated, the conversation in my head decides whether I act or delay. When I encourage myself instead of making excuses, I move forward even when it feels uncomfortable. Discipline grows when my inner voice supports effort rather than comfort. Many self-talk patterns come from the past. They are echoes of criticism, comparison, disappointment, and fear. Becoming aware of them is the first step toward change. When I listen carefully, choose my focus, and speak to myself with intention, my mindset strengthens, my limits expand, and my growth continues forward. Recognizing this helps me stop treating those thoughts as absolute facts. I begin to see them for what they really are, just repeated messages that settled in over time. I did not choose many of these ideas when they first entered my mind, but I can choose now whether I will keep repeating them or let them go. Awareness gives me space, and that space gives me power. It gives me the opportunity to rewrite the inner script that plays in my head every day. Replacing negative self-talk does not happen all at once. It requires patience, practice, and steady consistency. I start by noticing when my inner voice becomes harsh, extreme, or unfair. When that happens, I pause instead of accepting it automatically. I interrupt the pattern and replace it with words that support growth and forward movement. Over time, this effort feels less forced and more natural. Slowly, the voice in my head becomes calmer, clearer, and more helpful. The way I speak to myself quietly shapes how I speak to others and how I show up in the world around me. Confidence begins on the inside, long before it is visible on the outside. When my inner dialogue is respectful, honest, and encouraging, my posture changes. I stand taller, speak with more clarity, and take initiative more often. People notice this shift and respond to it, but it all begins internally. My future is shaped by the conversations I have with myself every single day. When those conversations are filled with doubt, fear, and constant criticism, progress feels heavy and exhausting. When they are filled with belief, direction, and purpose, progress feels possible and lighter to carry. Self-talk is not just background noise playing in my mind. It is guidance. It is direction. And when I choose my words carefully, I am choosing a stronger, healthier future for myself. Real change is rarely created in one dramatic or emotional moment. It is created through small, repeated choices made day after day. Controlling my mind is not something I accomplish once and then forget about. It is a daily responsibility that requires attention and intention. Each morning I make a quiet decision. I decide whether I will allow my thoughts to run on autopilot or whether I will guide them with purpose. That choice, repeated over time, shapes the direction of my life more than any single event. Many people wait until they feel motivated before they take action, but motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls depending on mood, energy levels, and circumstances. Mental control works differently. It is based on discipline, not feelings. It means choosing actions and thoughts that support growth even when inspiration is missing. On days when my mind seeks comfort, easy excuses, or constant distraction, discipline steps in. Discipline reminds me of what matters and keeps me aligned with my long-term goals. Daily mental control always begins with awareness. I pay close attention to what I allow into my mind. This includes the conversations I engage in, the media I consume, and the thoughts I repeat internally. Not everything deserves space in my mind. When I allow negativity, comparison, and chaos to dominate my attention, they influence my emotions and decisions without my permission. Choosing what I allow into my mental space is an act of self-respect. Consistency matters far more than intensity. One positive thought will not instantly change my life, just as one negative thought will not destroy it. The real power is found in repetition. When I consistently redirect my thinking toward growth, responsibility, and steady progress, those thought patterns become familiar. Over time, my default mindset begins to shift. What once felt difficult and required effort slowly becomes automatic. Daily mental habits shape identity. When I repeatedly choose patience instead of reaction, focus instead of distraction, and effort instead of avoidance, I start to see myself differently. I stop seeing discipline as something I force myself to do and begin to see it as part of who I am. Identity influences behavior more deeply than willpower alone ever could. Mental control also helps me handle setbacks in a healthier way. Life will not always follow my plans. Stress, failure, and unexpected challenges are unavoidable. Without mental discipline, these moments can easily knock me off balance. With mental control, I respond with flexibility instead of frustration. I adjust my approach instead of quitting entirely. I learn from mistakes instead of blaming myself or others. Rest and recovery are also important parts of mental control. Discipline does not mean constant pressure or endless pushing. It means knowing when to move forward and when to pause. When I listen to my mind and body, I avoid burnout and maintain balance. Sustainable growth requires both effort and care working together. The way I end each day matters just as much as how I begin it. Taking time to reflect on my thoughts and actions keeps me accountable. I notice patterns in my behavior. I recognize areas where I am improving. I also identify areas where I can do better. This reflection turns daily experience into learning and helps prevent repeating the same mistakes again and again. Over time, consistent mental control builds confidence. This is not loud confidence that depends on praise or approval. It is quiet confidence built on trust in myself. I know I can handle challenges because I have faced them before. I know I can stay consistent because I practice consistency daily. This confidence becomes the foundation of long-term success. When I control my mind each day, I stop chasing quick fixes and start building lasting change. My life does not transform overnight, but it steadily moves in a better direction. Small choices add up. Thoughts shape habits. Habits shape character, and character shapes destiny. This is how lifelong change is created, one intentional day at a time, one deliberate thought after another, and one consistent choice leading me forward.